Just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, it just seems like this whole situation, the longer it goes on, both DICE and EA continue to dig their own graves, better than any other games developer and publisher that I have ever seen in recent memory, by continuously slighting their hardcore fans. EA and DICE honestly just need to learn to keep their mouths shut at this point because they're only continuing to do serious harm to both the Battlefield franchise, DICE as a studio, and EA as a publisher in terms of the perception from gamers whose political ideology does not align with that of the one they are using a World War II shooter to push. So last time I touched on this topic, it was over a statement from Battlefield 5's design director Alan Kurtz and his social justice virtue signaling that revealed the true intentions of including women in a World War II shooter. This time, though, we're going to be mainly focusing on a new statement from EA's chief creative officer, Patrick Soderlund, in a recent interview with Gamasutra, which I will have linked in the description below. In this interview, Soderlund descends into full SJW mode in addressing the controversy surrounding the forced inclusion of women on the battlefield in Battlefield 5. But before we get to Soderlund's statements, let's go ahead and quickly revisit some of the main lines from Alan Kurtz's politically charged statement on Reddit addressing this same issue. "I knew this was going to be a fight when I pushed for female soldiers in Battlefield. I have a daughter, and I don't want to ever have to answer her question of, why can't I make a character that looks like me, with, because you're a girl. I fundamentally feel to my core this is the right way, and I will find myself on the right side of history. And I think many people will play the game despite their reservations, and maybe learn something either about history or themselves. This is part of making games art. I can't speak for that timing. I know personally that I wasn't in a position of enough influence to make it happen. I also know a lot in society has changed, and for me personally, I grew up a bit and looked at the world with new eyes. From within the industry, we've seen so much male domination for whatever reasons, and I work for a studio and a company that recognizes the value of diversity in what we do as game makers. That's been a big deal for me also. Sometimes just enough things come together to make it happen. It felt like an inevitability. The excuses were running out and the support was there, so it happens now." So I am not going to go into too much detail on this statement from Kurtz because there's already a 32-minute video on my channel, which I will also have linked in the description below if you're interested, that focuses mainly on this statement. However, the three quotes I want to make sure that you keep in mind are, "I have a daughter and I don't want to ever have to answer her question of why can't I make a character that looks like me, with, because you're a girl. I fundamentally feel to my core this is the right way and I will find myself on the right side of history. And from within the industry, we've seen so much male domination for whatever reasons." So these are the important quotes to hold on to because you will start to notice a trend between the two statements from both Kurtz and Soderlund. So let's go ahead and read what Soderlund had to say about the controversy in his interview with Gamasutra. It is as follows. "On the women in Battlefield, this is something that the development team pushed. Battlefield 5 is a lot about the unseen, the untold, the unplayed. The common perception is that there were no women in World War II. There were a ton of women who both fought in World War II and partook in the war, and we felt like in today's world, I have a 13-year-old daughter that when the trailer came out and she saw all the flack, she asked me, 'Dad, why is this happening?' And she plays Fortnite and says, 'I can be a girl in Fortnite. Why are people so upset about this?' She looked at me and she couldn't understand it. And I'm like, okay, as a parent, how the hell am I going to respond to this?" And I just say, you know what? You're right. This is not okay. These are people who are uneducated. They don't understand that it is a plausible scenario. And listen, this is a game. And today gaming is gender diverse like it hasn't been before. There are a lot of female people who want to play and male players who want to play as a badass woman. And we don't take any flack. We stand up for the cause because I think those people who don't understand it, well, you have two choices. Either accept it or don't buy the game. I'm fine with either or. It's just not okay." After reading that, you can probably see the similarities between the two statements. The main one, of course, being the reference to a question asked by each of their daughters over why they cannot make a character that looks like them. However, Soderlund takes this to another level by offering a direct comparison to Fortnite, a game that does allow you to play as either a male or a female in multiplayer. So is it a coincidence that both men used the exact same excuse to justify their approval of the decision to embrace a social justice agenda with basically the same argument? Absolutely not, and you would be stupid to believe otherwise. A multi-billion-dollar corporation, such as EA, does or says nothing on just a whim. Everything they do and say, especially from senior leadership in the case of Patrick Soderlund, is carefully calculated and planned out. Chances are Soderlund met with PR before this interview took place in order to go over what to say in order to synchronize their message across the company. Almost every organization, big or small, coordinates things like this. Someone in EA's PR department obviously thought the whole "sympathize with my child" line was the most effective rebuttal to valid complaints by the Battlefield community. This did not work for them, though, the first time, and it most certainly will not work for them a second time. The very analogy he uses in comparing Battlefield character customization to that in a game like Fortnite is not even a logical comparison. First and foremost, Fortnite is a game set in a fictional modern or near future world that has no claim to be a representation of reality in the slightest. Battlefield 5, on the other hand, is a game that claims to be, in Soderlund's own words, a representation of World War II and shows the, quote, unseen, the untold, the unplayed, end quote, aspects of World War II. This is the difference between the two titles. One fully embraces fiction, while the other embraces some form of actual reality. Just to further deteriorate any and every semblance of a point he tries to make here, let's address another issue in comparing these titles. Contrary to Soderlund's belief, Fortnite does not allow for true character customization. The game decides whether or not you play as a man or a woman, as well as the ethnicity of the character. It is not a choice, and all who play the game have no issue with this whatsoever. The characters are all presets, with the only customization options being simply skins. Why is his daughter not upset that she has to play as a man in Fortnite every other match? The reason for that is because this entire scenario is most likely as fictitious as Fortnite's claim on reality. However, if you did want to cater to this small minority of Battlefield players, why not implement female characters that are accurate to the setting of the multiplayer map in the case of Russian and French forces, to name a few off the top of my head? This would solve both the problems. Women who want the opportunity to play as a female character would be able to do so, and the majority of people who want a reasonably accurate representation would also be satisfied. This, to me, is the perfect solution for this entire problem. But we are forgetting the other main motivation behind this decision: greed. EA supports this decision because they know they can sell more microtransactions if they allow for as much player customization as possible. It all comes down to the money with any corporation, and especially in the case of EA. So at this point, I think it's safe to draw the conclusion that these two games are not even comparable in terms of the very nature of the game and the corresponding customization options. So using Fortnite as a reference to back up your reasoning was not the best choice. However, it would work if you wanted to use that Fortnite model and just allow for players to play as a female during certain games and for them to play as characters that are male during another. I think the alternation would be fine. It would allow for a certain level of historical accuracy. Say you're playing as the French Resistance against the Nazis. You would be able to have the choice to play as a female combatant because it would make sense in the context of the battlefield that you were on at that particular moment, and I think it would solve all problems. But like I said, this is all about selling microtransactions, and at the end of the day, it also allows for a development studio to push their particular political agenda at the same time by implementing it into a World War II shooter in which it has no place. So let's go ahead and get back to the statement from Soderlund. He presented a situation with his daughter in which she asked, "Dad, why is this happening?" And she plays Fortnite and says, "I can be a girl in Fortnite. Why are people so upset about this?" She looked at me and she couldn't understand it. And I'm like, okay, as a parent, how the hell am I going to respond to this? And I just said, you know what? You're right. This is not okay. I don't know about you guys, but every single time I read that last line, it just brings a tear to my eye. I feel so bad for him being put in such a difficult situation. Are you kidding me? What grown man cannot come up with a reasonable answer to his 13-year-old daughter's simple question? He could have simply said people buy a World War II game to experience that time period in both an authentic and fun way. Women during that time rarely had combat roles during wartime because that is just how things were back then. Games like Fortnite, Call of Duty, and even Battlefield 4 have female combatants because times have changed from back then and women play a much more active role in society now. Wow, that took me a total of 5 seconds to think of. This whole sympathize with my child nonsense is just a sad and sorry excuse and a pitiful attempt at winning people over to side with the forced agenda you're pushing in a game. It does nothing in winning people over. It doesn't even change people's mind in the slightest. We saw this happen with Alan Kurtz, and it's not going to have any different of an effect with Soderlund's statement now. So it's just a complete waste of time. No one cares. This is probably a fictitious statement anyway, so it does nothing for you. It does not further your argument in the slightest. So after this whole supposed real-life scenario, Soderlund then attacks those voicing their complaints. He calls Battlefield fans who are unhappy with the change, quote, uneducated, end quote. Because if you don't agree with him, you're wrong. That's just plain and simple. It's all in absolutes, and that is the typical sign of a fanatical SJW or extremist in general. Forget that the complaints once you get past the trolls may be perfectly valid. If you have a differing viewpoint than him, you can only be wrong. But just you wait. It only goes further downhill from here. Quote, today gaming is gender diverse, like it hasn't been before. There are a lot of female people who want to play, and male players who want to play as a badass woman, end quote. While there's no denying there are more women ever playing video games, it's still something that appeals and will continue to appeal more to men by a vast margin. Everyone loves to throw out the whole 54% of gamers are women argument, which is such a massive distortion of the actual facts. This number, of course, includes playing games like Candy Crush, Farmville, Solitaire, you get the point. I would say at the very most, women make up about 25% of console owners, if even that. Every midnight release I have ever been to throughout my entire life, of which there are many, I rarely even saw women lined up to pick up Battlefield games or any game at any midnight release. Rarely when I walk into GameStop or the Best Buy gaming section do I ever see a female shopper. That is just the reality. Men are the primary consumer base, and Battlefield is definitely no exception from that. I would probably estimate 90% of Battlefield's player base is men. So yes, while women are becoming more interested in gaming, it doesn't mean you slight the other 90% of your fan base and go against their wishes to cater to a much smaller audience that may or may not even buy your game. Then comes the claim that, quote, there are a lot of male players who want to play as a badass woman, end quote. That is just not the case. Now, I know this is probably not the most accurate sample in the world, but it still gives you a feel for the situation. I posted a survey asking guys, if you were given the choice, would you rather play as a man or a woman in your favorite video game franchise? The response has been overwhelmingly in favor of playing as a man, with over 80% of the 1,500 plus respondents selecting that option, and reading some of the reasons why it is exactly what you would expect. So I actually asked you guys to leave your reasoning in the comments section on the poll so I could kind of get a feel for why you picked the choice that you did. So I'm going to go ahead and read some of those responses. Because I'm a guy. Because I'm a man and I'd like to relate more to what I'm playing as. Because I'm a guy. Not biased, just because I'm male. I prefer male protagonists, but I also love good female leads like Tomb Raider. But in Battlefield, I want the battlefield to be as realistic as possible to the era. I think it's bullshit I'm being called a misogynistic jerk when nothing is further from the truth. But I think it's best summed up by this comment. I picked man, but only because if given the option in a game, that's what I always pick. For example, in the new Assassin's Creed game, I'm gonna pick the male option, but that doesn't mean I think women don't have a place in games or that I hate women. Some of my favorite games have a female lead. Games like and he goes on to name a bunch of games starring female protagonists. The problem is when they take a beloved franchise and change everything about it for political correctness. We're seeing this more and more in all forms of media, unfortunately. I'm sure some are upset that Gears 5 is about Kate Diaz and not Marcus, not because they're anti-women, but because they want the main lead to be Marcus, who they grew to love in a new story. Telling other characters' stories should be a different game, like how Uncharted did with The Lost Legacy. So I think this is spot on. I personally have no problem with playing as a female character, but when given the choice, I will always choose a male. Games like Horizon Zero Dawn and Tomb Raider are some of the best games I have ever played because the choice to include a female protagonist was a design decision from the very inception of the series versus a reaction to support social justice causes. So I think this kind of kills the narrative that guys prefer to play as women when given the option. I mean, just this survey shows that. Now, of course, this is not the most scientific survey out there. It wasn't random sampling by any regard, but I think it had a pretty good size for the pool of respondents. 1,500 people is definitely a pretty decent representation, at least in my mind, of what gamers actually want. But I'm not claiming this to be 100% accurate by any means. I just think it gives you a pretty good feel for the situation. So I think this whole narrative of guys wanting to play as a badass woman over badass men is just completely overstated and not the actual reality. Sure, there's some dudes out there who enjoy that, but it's not the majority of men out there. So it just kind of kills that whole narrative. So getting back to the quote we were just talking about from Soderlund, the part that really pisses me off is the last couple of lines. He says, quote, "We stand up for the cause because I think those people who don't understand it, well, you have two choices. Either accept it or don't buy the game. I'm fine with either or. It's just not okay." End quote. There you go. He is just so noble, standing up for the cause of forced inclusion and social justice. This guy literally just made himself look like the biggest asshole on the face of the earth right now. At this point, he has basically said, if you have a problem with the decisions we made in this game, regardless of your support and love of the prior entries in the Battlefield series, you can fuck right off. That is exactly what it feels like this guy is saying. Either get behind the agenda I'm pushing right now, or I want nothing to do with you whatsoever. And people wonder why we are so fractured as a society when it comes to ideological differences. So in his own words, he does not want you to buy the game. So do exactly just that. But at the same time, do not even dare for a second take the pressure off DICE and EA. Let's just say that this controversy surrounding Battlefield 5 plays out like the controversy surrounding the loot boxes in Battlefront 2. EA shareholders will be less than thrilled to find out that one of their executives was on record telling people to not buy the game. I can only imagine the reaction to that revelation. We're in a very good spot to do some serious harm to a company that obviously cares nothing for its fans and loyal players. Sure, on the surface, EA and DICE may look like they're making pro-consumer moves left and right by removing the premium pass and loot boxes from Battlefield 5, but their intentions are never that pure. Their main objective, just like every other corporation on planet Earth, is to make as much money as humanly possible. If recent events have taught us anything, it's to never trust EA. We have a great opportunity to send a serious message here to a development team that obviously is so caught up in pushing their own political agenda that they have abandoned the very people who built them up in the first place. Boycott this game and at the same time try to convince others to do the same. The only way a company like EA will ever change is when they take a substantial hit to their wallet, and that is what has to happen here. You can talk all you want, but anyone who is against this needs to put their foot down and not even pre-order this game. Make it blatantly obvious as soon as possible that we are not going to financially support any game that shoves a feminist anti-male agenda down our throats. But at the same time, do not go out of your way to attack those who are excited for this game. They could just be ignorant to the true nature of this game, or honestly, they just could probably not care less in the slightest. And that's their choice. But only by being better than the SJWs that viciously attack all who dare to question their so-called superior ideology can we ever hope to continue to win more people over. Obviously, we are the majority. Just take a look at the dislike ratio on the Battlefield 5 trailer. but we are never going to get people to openly admit their opposition to this game if those opposing the game appear to be toxic and hateful. It'll be very interesting to see if DICE and EA continue down their path of self-destruction in respects to this issue, or if they change their tune the closer and closer we get to launch, and the pre-order numbers are not looking too hot. Battlefield 5 already launches in between Call of Duty Black Ops 4 and Red Dead Redemption 2, two games I will personally be supporting this October and playing instead of Battlefield 5, which also happen to be two of the biggest games this entire generation. Add in the controversy surrounding Battlefield 5 and things are not looking too bright for this once great franchise. And like I said before, I really don't fault anyone for going out and supporting this game if you honestly just don't care, or if you're somebody who really just looks forward to Battlefield whenever it releases and it's your favorite franchise and you're going to play it anyway. Because at the end of the day, when all is said and done, it's your money and it comes down to your decision how you are going to spend your money. But personally, I will have nothing to do with this game whatsoever. But let me know your thoughts on Soderlund's statements and this issue in general in the comment section below. Hit that like button if you enjoyed this video. I would greatly appreciate it. Also, make sure to subscribe if you're new for future videos like this one, and click the bell for notifications so you are always notified when I upload a new video. Follow me on Twitter at Griffin_gaming, or click the link in the description below. I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you guys next time.